What's up, everybody out there? Turn on the lights so I can see all the people here tonight. Welcome to another episode of Pod Scum, the deepest, the darkest, the murkiest. I am your bastard of ceremonies, Mr. Rex Ruger, Rex with the triple X, also known as David Lee Roth Jr. But the hard science isn't in on that yet. But fingers crossed. I know it in my heart. That's right. I am the son of glam. The man, the front man for the band. The man with the plan. Smoking a few grams. Shazam! Going out with a bang. A bop, 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 bang, boom. Skilly, billy, boom. I move like the man. I talk like the man. I look like the man. Wouldn't be possible without a little product placement here. Yep. Responsible for all the irreparable ozone damage. But got a good guest for you tonight. So we can forget about our ozone woes. All right. And we can kick back and relax. This is going to be a nice little shoes off chat. And I am meaning shoes off. Hey, shoes are off. Kick back, relaxed with a guy who I think is nothing short of a legend. Then again, that's all I deal with are legends. So let's see if we can get him in here. I'm hoping so. You never know with rock stars, folks. Well, while we're waiting for him, I can plug my numerous bands. You can come and see me in any of the several bands that I front. Rex Ruger, frontman of the Jizz Drops, the Titty Smackers, and the Ejaculators. And I'll keep you informed on other pending projects. But right now, we're about to get busy with it, kids. Because right now, we have a bona fide star in our midst right here. Hello, sir.
Howdy. Turn my speakers up.
Gary Lee Connor, it's good to look at your face, sir. I've been a fan for so long.
Thanks.
It's just amazing. I mean, you have written songs that have truly touched and spoken to my soul that I could just never pay you enough gratitude for towards. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Thank you very much.
And as you can tell, it's probably a big honor for you to talk to me because, as you can tell, you're talking to David Lee Roth Jr.
Yeah, right.
But the hard science, I was just telling my audience, the hard science is not in on that yet. But I think DNA testing will eventually prove that.
Related to David Lee Roth, yeah.
Yeah.
His summon. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. How could I not? I'm thinking this might be my next tattoo right here. What do you think, Gary?
Oh yeah, there you go. Van Halen tattoo. That's wild.
so Ellensburg, Washington is where you come from, correct?
Yeah, well, originally. Now I'm in Texas, but that's where we came from way back in the mid 80s. Well, I moved there in the late 60s when I was 6 years old. I came from Barstow, California. Like, was born out in the middle of the desert. Then we moved up there, and yeah, we got into music and started the band in about 1985.
Now, when you're in Ellensburg, is this a town where there's, well, where obviously it'd be very easy to be creative? Was there anything else to do in this town?
No, it was like nowhere. I mean, and the thing is like, I don't know if people know what Washington is like. Well, Seattle is like 100 miles away over the mountains. And, you know, so like in Ellensburg's like a small town, about 15, 20,000 people, college town, but it's also a cow town. Like the rodeo is the big deal there every year.
Right.
And so, yeah, it was like nowhere, you know, like everyone's like, what, you know, there's nothing to do type of thing.
Right.
But there was a cool record store there, Ace Records. So that was one of the saving graces when we were younger. And also yard sales and Ace Records. Because all the old hippies were selling their records like in the 70s because they're like, we have to grow up.
Yeah.
And like get rid of all records, and we got stuff, you know, all the Beatles, and actually got like the first MC5 record at the yard sale. That was like one of the really early records.
Whoa.
Probably, you know, yeah, we had it around for a long time, and finally, like I was probably like 13 or 14, started listening to it.
Is that what men of a certain age start to equate with becoming a man, selling your records?
Yeah, I know. Well, see, the thing is, you know, I was thinking about this the other day. It used to be like, you know, you're 30 years old and like you can't listen to rock music anymore. That's for
right.
kids. Now it's like, you know, you're 80 years old. So
that's true. Right.
Play it like so many of the, you know, 60s guys, like
well, I remember growing up. I'm 49 years old, so I remember growing up and being a teenager in the 80s. And when that Seattle, Washington scene really started to explode in the early 90s there, did you guys feel like you were part of a like pop rock in the 80s had gotten kind of derivative? Did you guys feel like you were kind of like a cleansing, so to speak, for music, mainstream music?
Yeah, in a way. I mean, the thing is, in the 80s, like all the underground, you know, started with punk and like went through and like the independent and college radio stuff. I mean, that was like a great, amazing time for music. I mean, a lot of people are like the 80s sucked for music, but it wasn't. It was like everyone was just doing what they wanted to. There were a lot of small labels, bands, England and America, both. You know, I always find that I actually listen to a lot, even though I'm way into 60s stuff. Lately, I've noticed like my playlists, like I make for tons of 80s stuff comes up all the time. I'm like, I was really into the 80s stuff.
Yeah, well, I can't sit here and act like I'm not guilty of listening to a lot of the, you know, quote unquote hair metal or the pop metal that was around that days because the market was so saturated with it. But when you guys came along and brought what a lot of people would almost say to like, you know, like you almost like rained on the party, you know what I mean? Because your music was so much darker and heavier and so much more grounded in, you know, reality and actually like real life
grounded
problems.
In reality is really a thing, because it was just like, you know, it wasn't like all these bands were like trying to get famous like in LA, like in the 80s, you know, it was like all these bands were like, we're going to be the next huge thing. It was just they were making music and like doing stuff they wanted to do with like mostly friends. I mean, and by the time like, you know, the whole Seattle scene you know, exploded, like we were, you know, had been on SST for several years,
right?
We're completely pretty much apart from it. And people were like, who are these guys in Screaming Trees, and how the heck did they get on SST? You know, almost like they were pissed off at us, but like we have no idea. It was kind of a weird story how we got on SST, but yeah, I think like it was real, you know, it was like organic and real, like from the heart, instead of like being some like put on fake thing. The whole Seattle music.
Well, all those bands did start to become derivative because it did all seem like it was all like party driven and, you know, a lot of leather.
I know. Yeah, I mean, it was funny when we probably by like 93, 94, like when we started getting like guys who work for us when we, you know, started touring the bus and stuff, who had worked for some of the 80s like hair bands. They're like, you know, I don't get this. Like, there's not groupies all over the place, and it's like people are, you know, they were on drugs, but there was a lot of drugs around, but there were.
Shouldn't I be doing a line of cocaine off of a hooker's ass right now? Or
something? Right. It was much more likely that people would have like girlfriends or wives around. With, back instead of like groupies.
Now, obviously, well, you know, when that whole scene, and I know you guys probably cringe at it being called a grunge scene. I got used to what that word means.
Yeah, I mean, that was like it was pretty much like a joke back then. Over the years, though, it was just kind of like, whatever, grunge or something.
But if there was going to be a band, when I conjure up the image of what that word makes me think of, I think of two bands from there, and it's the Screaming Trees and Alice in Chains. If I were to put, you know, an identity to that term grunge.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, Alice in Chains was I mean, there was different things going on in Seattle. People think of it all the same now. Like Alice in Chains, they actually were kind of like connected to the hair metal thing, but their music was not like that. Yeah, and that's when I first heard of them. I thought that because they played a lot of the places in Seattle that were like, you know, when they were unknown.
Right.
And then, you know, then there was like a lot of the outsider people like us, Nirvana, and Tad, you know, guys who came from other places.
Right.
And then there was other bands like, you know, like Mother Love Bone, which ended up being like Pearl Jam.
Right.
And they were kind of guys from, I guess, Bellevue, I think. I mean, not being from Seattle, I don't know the areas too much, but
Yeah, when I see Andy Wood, I think of he was the David Lee Roth of that scene, because he seemed like he wasn't afraid of like a little showmanship and a little kind of having a toe dipped into that kind of.
Well, that's like, yeah, like Andy Wood, it was like a David Lee Roth parody. Yeah. And the weird thing is like in the small, I never saw them in a small club. I saw them at the Paramount one time, which is like the theater, and it came off. I was like, well, this is kind of cool, but I don't know. I think it would come off completely differently in a club.
Right.
You know?
Right. Yeah. It's almost like a little over the top when you're doing it for 30 people.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, do you guys consider yourself amongst that group of bands that really got popular around that time? Do you often think back to wonder like why the commercial success seemed to elude the Screaming Trees as much as it did the Pearl Jams and the Nirvanas, when the songs and the I mean, in my opinion anyway, the songs and the albums were right on par with everybody else, all of your peers?
There were a lot of reasons. I mean, we never would have thought anything like that ever could have possibly happened, before, because it's like, we're just doing, making albums and, being an actual band, and getting famous is kind of like, I don't know. But then like in the late 80s, after we've been around for like, 2-3 years and on SST, a lot of the bands we knew were starting to get signed to major labels, and we're kind of like, well, let's try that. And we got hooked up with Susan Silver, who was Soundgarden's manager.
Right.
And she just got them signed to A&M, and we got signed pretty early. It was like early 1990. So like then the first record, Uncle Anesthesia, that was like before the grunge thing hit and before Seattle was anything, as far as it was big in the underground. Right. Now, that's the thing, is like 1990, like Nirvana like hit huge, like England, like all the big like NME and Melody Maker, they were like talking about the Sub Pop thing. Right. But as far as like selling a lot of records, nobody was like Nirvana. Right. So that was like, we had a whole like year and a half of like being kind of like, well, I don't know what Epic's like, why the heck would they sign us? And they were trying to, because we did have a following from our SST records. We were selling like 10, 20,000, 30,000 records, maybe some of those records.
Yeah.
Back then, and which was really great, for an indie band at the time. It was awesome.
Sure. Really good.
But, yeah. So when Nirvana hit, things just completely changed, and we didn't realize it for a while, because it was like, wow, there's actually a commercial place for our music, Right. But I think, we had problems with, like Mark, with drugs, and band with drugs too. Right. That was part of it. I think it was not at first, that because we managed to make the Sweet Oblivion record, and just because at the time it was just kind of like, well, we're going to do another record with Epic. They want us to do it, but this was like in the summer of 1991, before the grunge thing, and it was like, so let's get together and do it. And we got had been in between drummers with Mark Pickerel, quit the band, and we had Dan Peters from Mudhoney played with us on the tours for Uncle Anesthesia, which didn't last that long. It was like probably 3 or 4 months, and we hooked up with Barrett, just kind of like, everybody we ever hooked up with, like, playing, was just kind of like, oh, well, we know this guy, we'll get him. And he had a van and a place to practice, which was like,
and it's almost like getting 2 guys, right? Because his hair is almost its own person too.
Oh yeah, his hair was insane when we first. His hair is long again now. At least the last time I saw his picture, and he's got, it's all gray, but it's like, he's got a detail. I could see it like it puffed out.
Well, you had mentioned earlier, though, you had touched on drug problems. Now, there is also several artists from there where it was widely publicized, namely Kurt and Lane, and then recently finding a lot of it delving into Mark Lanegan's book. You had to watch a lot of your close friends pass away over the years. Extremely tough.
Yeah, well, I mean, I never really had many close friends, because I've always been like kind of a hermit. But yeah, I mean, people we knew and loved their music, just it's really just weird how, I mean, it makes sense, because I mean, when you get do something like heroin, is like either going to get you directly by OD, or you're going to get so worn out or screwed up that you're going to die anyway. I mean, I don't know.
I think some of them not so much of a surprise, but what about Cornell? Didn't see that one coming.
Yeah, I don't know what. I have no idea. You know, I knew him pretty well in the early days, like when he produced Uncle Anesthesia out record. But you know, later on, you know, Soundgarden was like friends of ours, and used to play with him quite a bit. But you know, in the later years, I don't know. He got kind of not real famous as a solo artist, but you know, he was always around in the 2000s. And then when they got back together, it's like, oh, that's really great. It's cool. Yeah. And it was nice to be able to see that, you know, some of the bands are still doing stuff. Sure. But then, yeah, I don't know. That must have been just, I can't imagine how horrible it would be to be on tour and have like somebody in the band die. I mean, like with the Taylor Hawkins guy with the Foo Fighters recently. Yeah, I mean, you know, it's bad enough when someone has some kind of just problem like health or physical, or even, you know, just like a home problem, they have to go home or something because you know, but someone dying, that would just be
that's heavy. It's heavy.
Ultimate bummer. I can't remember what it was like for the Soundgarden guys, like the next day, you know, it's just like, everything's over now, you know. Right.
Yeah, more or less. Yeah. So you work intricately throughout the Screaming Trees years with Mark Lanegan, writing, crafting songs, you know, his voice, your guitar. So you work with him very closely. When he breaks off and starts doing solo stuff, do you naturally just kind of critique it? And what did you think of his solo albums?
I've always loved his stuff. I mean, I love his voice was just amazing, you know. It was like just a huge honor over the years to have him like singing like the songs that we did together. And you know, it was like and the thing was when he did his first solo album, the Winding Sheet album, is like we all decided to do solo albums. And like I did like the Purple Outside record and Band in the Band, Solomon Grundy, and we were originally gonna do them on SST. It was gonna be like the Kiss solo record, but Mark had individual. Yeah, see, Lanegan moved over to Seattle. In the meantime, we were still in Ellensburg. This was in 1990, and he got hooked up with Sub Pop, and he did his record there. And he didn't spend much time doing it. You know, he was just kind of like, yeah, he did that, and then we moved on, and it was still several years till I guess he did that Whiskey for the Holy Ghost thing. So he wasn't. But yeah, I think the main thing was I was just always perplexed as to why he didn't bring us any songs. You know, I heard him once or twice playing things. I was like, geez, why don't we do that? Especially in the years where like between Sweet Oblivion and Dust, where we were like just like kicking ourselves to try to come up with stuff, you know, like we came up with so many songs because after we finished, everything was different. We finished Sweet Oblivion and we finished the tours for it because, you know, for years I've been just sitting at home in Ellensburg writing songs, and you know, Mark come over and listen to songs, and we go on tour and do them, and then go record a record. But suddenly it was like we've been on this, you know, tour, living, had moved over to Seattle, and our whole lives were somewhat different. And I, you know, was in a different situation. And plus the fact that on Sweet Oblivion, that was when we'd all moved over to Seattle, and we all worked together, like actually, you know, not just like saying, here's a song, you sing it. It was like, I mean, Mark probably, that was the one record where he probably, you know, was involved in writing almost every song on the record, probably. You know, not just like the lyrics, but, you know, everything.
Right. Well, in his book, and I don't know how far you got through the book, but I've listened to the audio version of it and listened to him tell those stories in his voice. First of all, it's crazy that he was able to get that many albums out and be so super productive with what he was doing in his personal life and how the demons really seem to be, you know, really getting the best of him for a lot of years and still be able to put out music productively. Think that, but it seems to be that his attitude doesn't seem to be one of fondness or even being proud of the work he did with Screaming Trees, and I just don't understand why.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I think he was of the later records, you know, like probably
I would hope so.
And Dust. But especially Sweet Oblivion, because that was, you know, definitely, you know, totally
a masterpiece.
Yeah, and it was like he was so involved in it, whereas opposed to, especially like Dust, like some people I think, oh, Mark was he had almost nothing to do with that record, except for making us write songs, like me and you know, he'd be like, because like the whole, like for the 2 years, 94 and 95, my life consisted of like I had just got married and my wife was living in New York, but I had to stay in Seattle, and it would be like I had my 4-track and my guitar in the apartment. every day I get a call from Mark, like, what's going on? Which meant you better be writing songs. And then that night, at night, I'd like take a tape of drive across town, take a tape of him. You'd always want me to like stop at Jack in the Box or something, you know. And you know, get the but I wouldn't even go in his apartment. His hand would come out like and take the tape, you know.
So you were pretty much Grubhub before there was Grubhub for Mark Lanegan.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it was like tape. Here's the song and the food.
Yeah, no tip though, huh? No tip.
Year and a half. And Van was living a little north of Seattle. He'd come down sometimes, but it was like, you know, we were like writing every day. It was like probably 150, 200 songs. Most of them were, you know, not that good, but every once in a while there was something that came through and he'd be like, oh, let's do this. I mean, we actually had, at some point in the middle of 95, early 95, we had a tape of about 30 songs that we had sent to our managers that we were really liking a lot, and probably only a couple of them ended up on the record.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Every once in a while I put something out. I have a few, I have a bunch of them with Lanegan. He sang the demos, which he hardly ever did. Once in a while he'd sing on demos. And we had our managers, was this a big company, Q Prime, which managed like Def Leppard and AC/DC. They'd taken us up because they wanted to get into grunge. So our A&R guy, Bob Pfeiffer at Epic, had like hooked us up with them, and we were having this going through managers all over the place.
Yeah.
So so we had to do a demo for them, which is weird because like, why do you have to do a demo for your manager? It didn't make any sense to me, but we did. And Mark, the one thing we did in the middle of that whole time was we went to Australia and played the Big Day Out, which was actually really fun. It was kind of like a breath of fresh air because I've been sitting in dark Seattle writing songs for
watching it rain.
So, yeah, exactly. But so the night before we left for Australia, he had to sing all the songs, like 30 songs, and it was like, well, you got to do this, or you know, we're not gonna. The managers are gonna be pissed.
Right.
So he came down to the practice place, and we spent the whole day him singing, you know, on the demos, but he had a sore throat. Of course, I don't know. It was probably God knows what, you know.
Well, he seemed like he was always plagued by one thing or another quite a bit. So
yeah, you just like drop of a hat, he'd be like, cancel the show. Like,
yeah, I'd be remiss to say that he wasn't that he was not always in the best of health. You know, it seemed that anyway, or at least in his mind, he thought that he wasn't, because he seems to have a lot of tales of trips to hospitals and trips to infirmaries.
That was like, you always had to know where the hospital was on tour. It's like, there's a hospital, I better stop there. No, he was like, the thing is interesting. I don't know, a lot of people know, but I've talked about before that from the time the band started till about the 1990, he was completely sober. Yeah, as far as I know, because when he was in high school, he was like a massive partier, drinking, drugs, everything. And he got in the after high school, he didn't know what he was going to do. He was like working at Twin City Foods, like in the pea fields, like with combines and trucks and stuff. And he got run over by a truck. And it didn't break his legs, but it like bruised him up horribly. He couldn't walk, and he got so freaked out he thought he was going to die. The doctor told him, like, you got to stop drinking and stuff, or that's it.
So, this was when he was really young.
Yeah, he was massive hypochondriac. He was like thinking he was going to die every few seconds, and I'm sure we went to the hospital several times, like on tour. You know, just
it's according to his book, numerous times. Yeah. Now, obviously, there's always two sides to every story. Mark seems to make out in his book like there was a lot of, like, it was very tumultuous, a lot of turmoil on the road. Was there really as much infighting in the Screaming Trees as Mark Lanegan would lead us to believe in his book?
It was mostly him cowering, or us cowering, you know, like, what are we going to do? Mark's going to be mad at this type of thing. You know,
okay.
And Van and me being brothers had problems, but nothing, you know, I mean, nothing most brothers wouldn't have. It wasn't as bad as like the, you know, Ray and Davies type of thing.
I mean, was it ever to the point when you guys were going to play live, that I know infamously you played one of the talk shows, and you know, with the one where Mark appears with a black eye in his eye. Were there ever questions when you're going to play live, like there were some really close calls, or sometimes when you just kind of thought, God, I wish we didn't even have to play tonight, maybe we shouldn't?
Yeah, the funniest one well, I didn't, but like Mark would always have that. Any excuse possible, you know, he'd like cancel the show.
Let's get out of
but
here.
The funniest one was when in 1996, when we got Oasis was coming over to the United States, and they hadn't really played. They were huge overseas, but in the US they were still kind of like, oh, who is that? You know, and they never did get that big in the US, but they were, you know, biggest band probably of the 90s in England, you know.
And you guys notoriously feuded with them, true or false?
Yeah, well, yeah. What happened was they came over. We started out with Chicago or something. It wasn't a huge tour. It was like 10 dates or something like that on the East Coast. And the first show too, like Liam was pissed at his brother, and he didn't even come. And
they're two
like,
peas in a pod. They're a couple of peas in the asses.
Yeah, Noel sang all the songs. It was like the first time I saw him, it was just him doing the band. But then yeah, we had the thing with, there wasn't really a huge fight, but it was like Liam made some comment.
There was no love lost. There was no love lost.
Right. But then the funny
diplomatically,
we got down to North Carolina, and that day Lanegan was just like, man, I can't make it anymore. I got to go back, go home, or whatever. And the whole day he was just like, man, I got to tell the man, you know, because it's not just like our manager does. It's like these big time, you know, managers, Q Prime.
Right. Yeah.
Can't just tell him you're going to cancel. But so he had to have. Finally, has our road manager called and says, "Oh, cancel, and we have to go back, you know, home. Mark can't take it anymore." And then, like 5 minutes later, somebody comes in and says, "Like, oh man, the Oasis canceled. They're going back to England. They're not doing the rest of the tour." So
they're packing it in. Yeah,
not said anything, and everyone was like, "Oh, it was Oasis, not you guys." So that was one of the later. That was right after Lollapalooza.
Yeah, that was the one and only time that I saw you guys, the '96 Lollapalooza, and I think by then Lollapalooza had kind of slipped away from the vision that Perry had, because now it was suddenly you know, Lollapalooza sponsored by Budweiser, and it was you know,
the corporate
Metallica host headlining.
Yeah, and by that time they were like corporate rock.
They had the trimmed up hair and the At that point, their albums were, you know, hard rock at best.
Oh yeah, and that's who Q Prime managed Metallica, which is probably one of the reasons we got on.
Right. That year. Now, we go back to February here, the untimely passing of Mark Lanegan, which the world obviously knows about. Where are you when you hear the news, and who tells Gary Lee Conner this news?
I was just at home, and we were really lucky that we didn't find out from, like, you know, looking at Facebook, because an old friend of ours, Gus Brandt, who was at one time one of Mark's managers, called Mark Pickerel, and Mark Pickerel called Van, and they called me, and they're like, they didn't tell me right away. I was like, well, man, Mark died. I'm like, man, we were just like, and we had a like three-way call, and then we called a couple other people like Steve Fisk, our first producer, and Jack and Dino, and talked about it for a while, and realized that later that day it was going to be all over. I couldn't believe how much news there was about it. I mean, you know, Mark wasn't the most famous guy in the world, but
but the outpouring was tremendous. Yeah, I agree. When I was on social media, I kind of had that same sentiment. I was kind of like, wow, this is more than what I thought would be out there. Not that he didn't deserve it, but it's more than I thought I would see out there.
Yeah. So we were like, you know, I mean, it was a shock in a way, mainly because I suppose, you know, I always thought he was going to die all the time back in the old days.
Right. Now I thought he was out of the woods with it now.
Yeah, because I never really, I talked to him like in person like once, like since like 2002 or something like that, you know.
Well, I just thank God that we have that audiobook, because let me tell you, Gary, I have fallen asleep to that audiobook and listening to his story so many times. He morphed over the years into a very throaty. He almost morphed into like our generation's Tom Waits. It's like listening to Tom Waits read you a bedtime story.
Yeah, I can see the similarity.
The audiobook is fantastic. Thank God he left us with that at least, and all the great music. Now, speaking of great music, a couple of side projects back in the 90s. Mad Season, Temple of the Dog, two of the big ones that came out of that time. What did you think about the side projects? Was there one you liked more than the other?
I don't know. Let's see. The Temple of the Dog thing was weird, because I remember we never, like, Pearl Jam to us were quite kind of like, they always wanted the guys, not, I don't know about Eddie Vedder, but Jeff and Stone. It was kind of like, these are the kind of guys in Seattle who want to be like LA band.
They want to be rock stars.
Yeah. And that was one of the reasons I've read that Mark Arm quit Green River because they were gonna like, I think they were thinking about moving to LA or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, and the inside of that Temple of the Dog thing had this written out. I don't know, was this some kind of dumb like mission statement or something? But it was kind of really cheesy, and I was just like, we were on tour somewhere, I remember Boise, Idaho, and I was looking at the tape, and I was just like, and I smashed the tape because it was so anti, like, you know, like, you know, just like the kind of like real small time sort of organic
band
type of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, but I didn't even listen to it. But years later, I listened to it. This stuff was, yeah, Temple of the Dog stuff was really great. I really was some really great songs. And
now, back in those days, there was kind of a rivalry. There was a rivalry at one point, heavily, especially between Pearl Jam, namely Eddie Vedder, and Kurt Cobain, where, and maybe you can explain this to me as a musician, because when I saw this quote and first heard this, maybe because I'm not a musician, I didn't understand it, but they had said that Kurt had thought that he was very critical of the mixes on 10 and thought that they leaned a little too commercial. But is he able to say that when at the same time his Nevermind album is selling millions and millions of albums?
Well, I don't know. It's Nevermind commercial. I mean, he had all those songs way before they ever hit big. I mean, I remember listening. They would play a lot of those like in 1990. Like live, and I remember, in fact, I knew half the record when it first came out. You know,
so could he be saying something like that, maybe to take the shine off the fact that his own album is very commercial, and maybe just taking the poke at Pearl Jam because they were there and an easy target?
I thought that. I don't know. We had way less contact with Nirvana after they got real big. I mean, we did play with them a few times, but you know, they've always got this. It's like they have the you know, wall of like management and record company and stuff around them. They get
and that is what you're describing is rock stardom, though. If you're not able to get to somebody that you've been friends with, I mean, doesn't that kind of epitomize what getting to be a big rock star is?
Mark was always friends with Kurt, though. I don't really know how that affected their friendship because they were really good friends before. You know, he was the best friend. But I mean, we knew Nirvana, especially, you know, we were more friends with Chris than me and Van probably than Kurt. But we, you know, he was, because Kurt was always kind of quiet and, you know, reserved around.
Right. And judging by Mark's book too, you know, obviously drugs entered into the friendship too, you know, which obviously, you know,
right. I don't
sweetens the pot, so to speak.
Yeah, because when Mark started being friends with Kurt, it was before he really started doing heroin. It was like in 1990. It's weird because Mark went from like being sober, and then we went to Europe in 1990, and he started smoking pot.
Yeah,
and then. And a year later, right before Sweet Oblivion, what happened was we had this wreck where the van, we had two vans, and he was riding the equipment van. We were all riding this minivan, and the middle of Wyoming on black ice, it flipped over and like almost killed everybody, but it didn't. It was amazing. Nobody got hurt seriously.
You almost had a Cliff Burton incident.
Yeah, it was, you know, the van flipped all the way over to the other side of the road upside down, and nobody was seriously hurt. Amazing.
Oh, thank God.
Right after that, he started drinking again. So that was like, and see, the drinking made him like social, and suddenly he wanted to hang out with us, wanted to like, you know, rehearse and write songs. But then about like 93, especially when we toured Alice in Chains, he started getting into heroin. That was sort of like, you know, he didn't want to hang out with it. Right. We were doing it.
Well, I'll tell you what, I saw Mark appear on a podcast with Joseph Arthur, and he really had me hooked on the book when he said that it was going to include a lot of stories about Lane Staley. I feel like Lane Staley is kind of that guy to me, like I said earlier, when I thought of the word grunge, where he really epitomizes, you know, with the lifestyle and what I imagine the sound of that guy's voice would be. And I think a lot of times that he doesn't get his just due as a musician because he is overshadowed by the Eddie Vedders and the Chris Cornells.
Yeah, Lane was an amazing singer. I didn't, until we toured with them, I didn't know much, you know, other than I thought they were like a hair band, and I didn't realize that when I started listening to their stuff, it's like, no, man, they're like, they have some elements of more metal elements in their music. But I think, in fact, I'd say probably like Dirt is probably the best, other than like, I mean, Nirvana was like, it was my favorite bands ever, but it's like one of the best grunge albums. You know, if you want an epitome of grunge, because it just sounds like, I mean, it's called Dirt.
Right. Yeah. That doesn't sum it all up. I mean,
no, but he was a great guy. I mean, you know. And that's funny because like the band was like split, sort of like some of them did coke, like Jerry was always doing coke.
Yeah, yeah.
Lane was always like having. Of course, you have probably in the short term you have a lot more problems like having to cancel shows and stuff. Doing heroin and also going to Europe and like having that was like one of the problems with like Lanegan and Lane, like in Europe, like having to have drugs in the next country.
Score drugs
before EU.
Yeah,
when you had to go over borders every time you went from Germany to England.
Well, and then it sounds like he spent almost the equivalent of a full-time job in some of these countries, hitting the streets and trying to score. That just sounds so daunting.
Yeah, Mark would do that later. I know. Yeah, he'd always like hit the bad part of town, especially like by the time we got to Lollapalooza. As soon as you get to the town, he'd be gone, and then they come back like, man, I almost got killed.
yeah, he had some hairy close calls, that's for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Now I think years back I read in an article, and I would definitely want to bring this up to you. Now, me being a guy my size, you can't tell I'm sitting down, but I'm 6'4", 260 pounds. I'm a big guy. I read once a journalist theory on what held back the Screaming Trees from commercial success. Do you think it could have been image because you guys are a couple of big guys that don't look like an Adam Levine or?
Well, I think it might have been if the grunge thing hadn't ever hit, probably people could have said that. I mean, that was kind of like, I don't think that didn't. I think it was a lot more the personal type problems, you know, with drugs and
certainly don't take that bad, Gary. I mean, I'm a married guy, man, but I love your look. I could reach through right now and give you a big fat kiss.
In fact, I mean, that's the thing. That was one of the features of the band is like being big guys. I mean, everyone's like really tall too. Like I'm the shortest guy and I'm like 6'1".
Yeah. You know, well, you and your brother are definitely the epitome of, you know, in your flannels. You guys are a couple of big old backwood Washington State boys.
Right. Well, when we were trying to get signed to a major label in 1990, well, I think it was Atlantic or some label like that. They were like, well, we might sign him, but we got to get rid of one of the big guys because we don't like, you know, the image or whatever. So that did play somehow.
I think sometimes it becomes style over substance, and that's unfortunate.
On the other hand, back like the old Sub Pop column, Bruce Pavitt's column in the Rocket. Like I remember like one of the first things we ever had written about us was like Screaming Trees, like they're fat and they sweat like pigs, but he meant it in a good way. And I always thought that was really cool. It was like, cause that's what, you know, this is
I watch old videos of you guys though, man. And I you know, I'm pretty proud of the fact that I'm also feel that I'm pretty adept at doing this too. I have, for a guy my size though, I move pretty quick and have pretty good cardio. You guys really put in a good workout though. You guys didn't slack on stage for being big guys.
Yeah, after the band ended, I gained a lot more weight. Probably because like, I managed to stay like under 300 for years, and it wasn't until like a few years ago, like I finally like lost some more weight, but I was probably like 350, 360, but I was like 270 or something.
Now, what's the current out in Washington now? Or, you know, Washington State, Seattle, you know, you could say Seattle specifically, or, you know, surrounding areas. But the music scene currently in that area, what's it like nowadays?
I don't know, because I'm not there, but I kind of, you know, see I have a lot of Facebook friends. There's still a lot of bands around. I think mostly, and it's mostly, at least, I don't know, if they're younger people doing music there, I have no idea. But it seems like people, you know, in their 40s, 50s, and, you know, I'm almost 60. I'll be 60 in a month. So like, it's weird because like, I'm like really on the edge of like the age of people in the Seattle scene. Like there's a couple of people my age, like Mark Arms, about the same age. And it goes anywhere from like about 60 now to, you know, 50. So who the person is, a lot of them are, I'd say the average age is probably like 55.
Right? I'm going to be 50 next year myself. Yeah, and I'm feeling every bit of it. So,
I know. Well, it's cool. I mean, we have a lot of fans. It's just because it doesn't seem like we have as many fans that are older than me, but we have a lot of fans probably between 40 and 60.
Right. Right. What was it like back when that scene was really exploding and people were running out and buying $300 designer flannels, and you guys were just all over the place? What were the conversations like when you did tour with the Alice in Chains and the Nirvanas? What were the conversations like seeing what your music was doing to society and pop culture?
Yeah, it was really weird because
did it freak you guys out?
Especially by like, you know, a year or two after, like 93, 94. Yeah, it was like, the whole thing was surreal. Because like what happened was, you know, with the one show I could really put up as a dividing line was the Paramount show with Nirvana on Halloween in 1991.
Yeah.
Because at that show, everyone was just hanging out, all the bands in front in the lobby of the Paramount talking to Kurt and Chris and, you know, and then they were saying, and I remember they were telling us like, yeah, we sold like 300,000 records. And everyone was just like, holy moly, that's insane, you know, and that was nothing.
Yeah.
You know? And then like, you know, a few months later, it's like, what the hell is going on? And then we were working on our record and didn't really know on Sweet Oblivion. And, you know, by the next year, it was like had hit big, and Pearl Jam too. And so, but then that was kind of like the first surreal part of it. The next surreal part of it was when you have like grunge fashion.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. It was crazy.
Like, yeah. Or like the best one was the New York Times thing where they called Megan Jasper at Sub Pop, and she told them like all the fake grunge, you know, terms and stuff. She like totally pulled the wool over their eyes.
Yeah, but you guys, I mean, for that moment in time, though, I mean, probably from like 1990, 91 to about, you know, 96, 97.
Yeah.
You guys and your scene, the world was focused on that scene at the time, even though you guys had been creating music a lot longer than just that time period. Was it crazy? Did it seem like overnight when all of a sudden that spotlight was just on you guys?
Well, not really, because what happened was, like I said, like there was a Nirvana show. We were working on the record, and we went to New York, and like I was in New York some because my wife lived out there too. Like we got married in '93, but I was still going back and forth, and then we were on tour from all of 1992 or later to like middle of '93. So it's kind of weird when you're on tour; you don't really see what's happening. You know?
Right.
And so we come back and I start noticing like. And I went back to Seattle, and people start like recognizing me, like walking down the street and stuff.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
And that was just me. I can't even imagine what it would have been like to like be Kurt or something like that. That would just be really horrible.
Just so recognizable. Yeah,
but I just
had to be
stuff. Go to the store, you know.
Now, so you had said earlier that that sometimes you guys would feel almost like overpowered by Mark. Like, hey, are you guys writing songs? What was the creative process like creating those albums? And it was literally just like, you know, gun to your head, write some songs, Gary, and then give them to me. Like,
well, see, in the old days, when we first started, we kind of like we're a band. We'll try to write stuff together. The first album, Clairvoyance, and then it would have, you know, I was like. I had just got a 4-track when we first started, and I was like way into like poetry, but I'd never written songs. I was just learning to like make, you know, songs with my, you know, stuff I've been writing poetry wise.
It sounds way more badass when it's songs over poetry, right?
Yeah, songs. Yeah, I was like way into poetry though. I would like, you know, I didn't really use very many of my poems for songs, but it taught me to like work with words and stuff.
I'm guilty of penning a few poems. I'm guilty.
Yeah. It's fun to do.
Sure.
It's not really fun to read them. It's fun to write them.
No, because I read a lot of mine back, and it's just like self-wallowing crap, a lot of it.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So yeah, and then I would just write stuff and give tapes to Mark. Every once in a while, Mark and Van would get together and write something. Mostly it was just me. And then I give a tape to Mark, and he'd like, well, this is way too psychedelic. It sucks. We change, you know, like some of the lyrics or the title or whatever. And so that went on until all the way through Uncle Anesthesia. But then, like I said, we already had a huge history by the time you got to like Sweet Oblivion.
Right, quite a catalog.
SST, and we'd have the Uncle Anesthesia record, and then we were like, you know, going through a bunch of like personnel changes. With Van had left the band a couple times, and then we got back together with Van and got Barrett, and then suddenly you know have the band, and the whole process changed in a really great way that we all got together and not just wrote the songs. We get together with Mark and rehearse, which is something we hardly ever did. It's like, you know, just rehearse and all come in and sing. And then, but what was horrible by the time we got, and one of the reasons that we had the 4-year period in between Dust and Sweet Oblivion was because Mark didn't show up. Like when we came back to the next record after Sweet Oblivion, he's not there. You know, he's just telling us to do it, and he's not involved in it. And that was, you know, one reason that we took so long, because we did do a record that we threw out in like late '93 and early '94. that was, you know, probably not near as good as what we did eventually. But on the other hand, we missed out on 1994, which is still a pretty big year for grunge.
Yep.
Grunge, and we knew we were missing it. Because I've seen a lot of articles about like 1996 was the year the bottom fell out of the alternative, you know.
Yeah.
Which is really true. You know, Lollapalooza wasn't as big a deal by 1996. Even though
then suddenly Hollywood made the movie Singles. All of a sudden there was really this whole, you know, and it got to be a little bit cringeworthy because it was just like, okay, we get it. There's this area where there's all these talented bands coming from. We're being blessed with good music. But I mean, come on, man. Seattle's been there for hundreds of years before this.
Yeah. Well, until 1996, like they were always looking this the next grunge band or the next, you know, rock band at least. But then I remember in 97 they were talking about, or maybe it was 96, like Prodigy. This is the next big thing. It's like more like techno oriented, but kind of rock too, you know.
Yeah. So you as a solo artist have put out stuff under the Microdot Gnome, which is obviously to anybody out there who's partied or had any kind of fun in their life would have to understand that that's a direct reference to hallucinogenic drugs.
Yeah, right.
Are you a huge fan of hallucinogenics?
Well, it's some people probably are surprised, but I actually only did acid once.
Don't worry, Gary. I don't work for the DEA. You're good.
No, it's okay. I did acid once in 1996, like right. In fact, but I mean, a lot of the Screaming Trees, like Invisible Lantern, even parts of Even If and Buzz Factor are definitely influenced by. Yeah, probably at least, especially like Ivy, the song from from Invisible Lantern, the first song on that. Yeah, that was like an interesting song because right after I did acid, and it was like Christmas time in 1986, and we were working on Even If and Especially When. And right after I did that, I wrote a bunch more songs, and we also got signed to SST right at that time. And we're like, well, we'll go record. And so we recorded a lot of songs like Transfiguration and Other Days in Different Planets, Don't Look Down. Those are probably songs I wrote after I did acid. Right. And it was like a long trip. It's parts of it were bad and parts of it were good. But what happened was we were playing in California in that fall before that.
Right.
And the guy I met said, hey man, I'll like send you some acid if you send me an album, you know, Clairvoyance album, because we didn't have any with us. And he did. I don't think I ever sent him the record back. But it was like 5 like tabs, just like white tabs.
Yeah.
And I took one night and I was like, oh, it's not doing anything. So I took another one. And before I knew it, I'd taken all of them. And that was like pretty much like 24-hour, you know, trip. And it caused me a lot of anxiety later. And I smoked pot occasionally before that. And I didn't smoke pot for at least a couple of years after that. I never was really that into pot.
So did you end up doing a lot of shrooms? Is that what you did a lot of?
No,
or you only tripped the one time?
Now, Van was more into acid. He did acid a lot of times, and everything. But it was weird because like the main thing, like I would smoke pot once in a while, and
I still do that. That's about all I do.
Yeah, the main
that's about it these days.
Psychedelic experience I had was that one, and there was a couple times I did hash, what I had kind of, but not in the old days. This was like later. Like in the mid 90s, but yeah, in the old
coke,
days,
huh? No coke, and managed to.
No, I've never done coke. Never done coke or heroin.
And managed to stay away from heroin too.
Well, I mean, you know, after seeing all the coke and heroin
problems, right. When you're seeing the fallout of it,
I don't want to do that stuff because I'm going to end up like either dying or be in a complete basket case. You know?
Yeah. Well,
so
I saw in an interview where Mark, and I believe it was the Joseph Arthur podcast I saw him on, he made mention of attempting through cassette tapes way back when to try to get SST to sign Nirvana. And he said on the show, quote, SST and Greg Ginn didn't get it. If the songs were so great, and you yourself said they were one of the greatest bands that you'd ever heard, what was there really not to get? Because I don't know if they got to the bottom of that, because I think they're asking the same question. What was there not to get? The fact that the songs were fucking great?
The reason I was like I was blown away. We saw them. They played in Ellensburg, and there was a few people there at Hallam Center in 1988.
But that's like, a big ball drop, though, right, for SST? Big ball drop, not going.
I know. And I was just totally blown away by them live. But then I saw them another time, and they weren't really that great live. So they could be amazing live. But the music, I don't know. Maybe I don't really know what the tape was, if it was the stuff from Bleach. I mean, Bleach really has the edge of like the pop music stuck in with the metal-y sort of stuff, you know. But some of their early demo tape wasn't. It was more weird. You know, kind of it's like it's really heavy, and there's a few, you know, kind of cool,
very raw.
Yeah, but I don't know why they like Soundgarden. That's what Mark Pickerel actually got Soundgarden SST by giving them a tape. And the other thing is, though, the reason they signed us was because of Other Worlds. Our very first thing we did, where Mark sings like, oh, the doctor quit. His voice was like he'd never sang really before, you know. And it wasn't until Clairvoyance he realized that he had a voice, and then it just developed over time.
Now, looking back on all the bands, you guys all were kind of coming up around that same time. You consider yourself sometimes almost like one of the forefathers, the godfathers of that scene, because don't you predate most of those other bands that made it?
Yeah, we started in '85, and we got signed to SST in '87, and you know, we had 3-4 records on SST before.
Was anybody else getting big around that time though, other than you guys?
Not really. We didn't know what was going on in Seattle. You know, we over the first couple of years we were together, we heard of like Green River. You know, got some of the records. Every once in a while we go over to Seattle and go to a record store. Once in a while go to a show. Usually big concerts. It wasn't probably till like '89 I started going to like, you know, rock shows, like smaller shows. Like, but yeah, we didn't have, you know, as far as we knew, there was absolutely nothing. It was like a desert of music over there. And, you know, we toured all over the country playing, you know, all sorts of places that, you know, it was kind of cool because in the old days we played the same places that Black Flag had like played and stuff, because we had the same booking agent, the Global, which is part of SST, which went along. That was like one of the amazing parts of being at SST is like the Global booking agency had a huge network of like small clubs that play all over the country, and they'd always like make sure you always get paid because they wanted the other bands they had, you know.
Right.
You know,
you mentioned playing some of the same places as Black Flag. Ever any encounters with Henry Rollins?
Yeah, we played, not in the early days, but like we played with him one time in San Francisco at the I-Beam. And I just remember he was eating ice cream somewhere. Van knew him a little bit better than I did. I just remember he was eating ice cream. And like right before he went on, he'd like do push-ups.
Yeah, he was pretty intense. Oh,
yeah. Who was it?
He's lightened up a little now in his older age, I think.
Yeah, I forgot that I broke a bottle on stage before they played, and he stepped on the glass, and he kept playing though. I don't know, and he was bleeding or something.
Yeah, and he was part cyborg back then, I think. There probably nothing was going to slow him down back then.
Yeah, right. But
now recently, when I've had other musicians on here, it seems like now in the record industry, it's tough to make any kind of an album where people sit down and listen to it from start to finish and enjoy the experience. Is it more just a singles driven? Are you able to make full albums? I see what a lot of these metal bands that are coming out here and tell me they're doing. A lot of people are taking, hip hop artists too. They're taking like the EP route. Really well crafted songs, but just a small batch of them at a time. Is that the best way to go?
If you want to like be commercial, probably. I mean, I just do it, you know, for my own. The only reason I do music anymore is just for me, you know. And I have a few people like to listen to it too, which is kind of nice, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, and a lot of people seem to still listen to the Screaming Trees. I'm really amazed.
Oh yeah,
people are listening to it like on Spotify and stuff. Like we got something like 500,000 like listeners a month or something. Which, my own stuff, I probably have like 100 listeners.
Right.
But that's fine because that's not why I do it, you know.
Yeah, but if you've got 100 people truly enjoying it, though, I think that speaks volumes.
That's what's important.
Yeah,
and the music industry is completely 180 degrees different, I'm sure, than it was back in the day. And yeah, I think, you know, if you do want to get popular, probably the single thing, you know, as people like what they do now is they like release a single and then maybe another single, and finally if they do a record, it's like they do the record after several singles. But I've thought about that before, just put out, but you know, I don't really care. So
because it's very tough, you know. Back in the days, like you'd sit down and, you know, whether it was a live album or if you sat down and listened to Dark Side of the Moon, you sat down and listened to Dark Side of the Moon, you know, you didn't, you know.
Yeah, I hardly ever. One thing that kind of sucks is I find myself, I hardly ever just sit down and listen to a record. I'm always doing something. I'm looking at the computer.
Yeah.
Listen to music, and I try to listen to a lot of newer music, but you know, usually not popular music. It's like stuff I like. There's a ton of new music out there nowadays. I mean, people who say like, oh man, there's nothing new, nothing good anymore. I mean, I found, you know, tons.
Who's
and
a
tons
band right now? Who's a band right now? Gary Lee Conner would pump right now. Who's somebody that's out there right now that you just are digging?
Well, they're not quite as old or new, but the Black Angels, I really like them a lot. They have
Black Angels. I'm going to write that down. If I'm getting a recommendation from Gary Lee Conner,
yeah. Oh, this is some other bands.
Gary.
The OCs or the OCs, they're like, they keep changing the name. First they were OC like letters, then they were the OCs, then the OCs, and now that and then Psychedelic Porn Crumpets, really like them a lot. They're and also King Gizzard and the Wizard Lizard. Like that was one of the bands that I started listening to about 4 years ago that kind of like got me into like.
That sounds like a band that would be listened to by a guy that would refer to himself as a microdot gnome.
Yeah,
it fits.
They're actually pretty popular, and they have on Facebook. They have a lot of younger fans too. Some of these bands, you know, there's a lot of bands that are influenced by a lot of the, not necessarily just grunge, but earlier music that we were influenced by, that are, you know, the guys that are probably in their early 30s or something that are making some really great music now. It's not like popular, but it's like kind of like, I guess probably it's almost like jazz, you know,
right?
Like a not, it's
or here.
If you were into jazz, you probably, there's a lot of great jazz now,
right?
But I mean, if you look at the top 40, of course, the top 40s always sucked. I mean, I've seen like. Every once in a while, I'll see like the top 40 from like 1980 something or 1960 something.
Casey Kasem.
Yeah, in the late 60s, there was a few things on the top 40, but still, there was just a lot of garbage.
Yeah, a lot of garbage, a lot of filler, not much filler, and a lot of filler.
Yeah, you'll see like there's like Beatles or Cream or something, but then there's always crap.
Yeah. Now, when you look back at your career, and I love Mark Lanegan. His voice is so ingrained in me. The melodies that you come up with, the singing that he does, just like I said in the beginning, it speaks volumes to me. It just speaks to my soul. But do you ever look back and think, with all the headaches and the infighting, is there ever a time like when you thought, man, if maybe we had made a move? Was there ever a thought about replacing Mark?
We didn't think about we kind of did. But it wasn't until like 1995 when we were trying to work on that Dust record where it was just like, we're never going to do this record. And also the whole horrible thing that happened is the focus of the band was not the music anymore. It was like trying to make a living. Right. You know, and that was like those whole years like before Dust, in between Sweet Oblivion and Dust. It's like
you're trying to avoid working a day job pretty much.
Yeah, and it's finally like, you know, we actually really have a chance to do that.
Yeah.
If we could have made another record earlier and Mark would have been, you know, a little more sober, then maybe we could have done that. But, you know, we didn't.
He got too distracted with the solo career?
He didn't really get distracted with the solo career until after that. He did do Whiskey for the Holy Ghost during, I don't know how he did that because he was so messed up that year, like in 1995.
You ever look at any of those solo songs and think, God damn, I wish he would have brought those to me?
Some of them, yeah. I mean, I don't know about anything specifically, but just in general, I mean, I think the band would have been much more, you know, it would have had a deeper sort of like feel or something if he would have been.
Just from what I hear about your conflicting attitudes with like you liking more of a psychedelia, and obviously it's no secret that Mark's stuff is very downtrodden, very dark.
I put it this way: if Mark hadn't been in the band, we would have ended up being like probably, I don't know, like bands I love, probably like, you know, like the Fuzz Tones or like the Cynics or, you know, one of those like 80s psychedelic revival bands. Yeah. Because that's what, I mean, if you look at the cover picture of Clairvoyance, that was like, had like tie and like Beatle haircut and like, you know, glasses.
Yep. Very throwback.
That's what I was totally into. I had just, you know, in the early 80s, like when I was in high school, I was way into like prog, and King Crimson. I wouldn't listen to anything else. I thought punk rock was bullshit. But then like about 81, I started listening to, it was weird. The way I got into punk and new wave was by XTC, English Settlement record. For some reason, that record kind of like bridged it between, and then I started listening to all sorts of like Dead Kennedys and Black Flag and a lot of other, you know, like Echo and the Bunnymen, Teardrop Explodes, stuff like that.
Right,
and
right
about 84, I got the Pebbles collection, you know, the old 60s stuff. Like it's like the Nuggets collection, but it's like, you know, a lot of And I started listening to tons of that stuff and more psychedelic stuff that I already listened to, you know, when I was younger, because I was like really into the Beatles and stuff like that in the, you know, when I was like 14 years old, before I got into prog. But that was like what I was way into was like the psychedelic revival of Plastic Land. That's another band. It was like one of my favorites.
Yeah. Now, when you were growing up, your family owned a video store.
Yeah. Yeah, we started
a real cool fun fact here, Gary. You can't spell Van Halen or VHS without VH.
It's true. Yeah. VHS. That was it. Yeah. In fact, that was
a lot of VHS tapes flying out the door back in those days, huh?
The genesis of the Screaming Trees was in New World Video. Like we did start playing in our house, but that's where we ended up rehearsing. And we started the video store in 1984, and the band got together in 85. And then there was a huge back room that nobody was using, and we were like, well, let's practice back there, you know, and you could practice all night.
So your pops gives Mark Lanegan, is that how it starts? Your pops gives Mark Lanegan a job?
Yeah, we met him first. Yeah, everyone worked there. I worked there, Van worked there, Mark Pickrell worked there, everyone worked at the video store. And then so it became, you know, so part of the whole legend of the Screaming Trees was the New World Video. And there was a couple of shows we had back there. One time we had Beat Happening playing in town, and they had the police shut it down because it was too late. And so we went over there and played, and then you couldn't hear it like outside really. It was downtown. So, you know, we played later there. And then I think Mark Pickrell had Reverend Horton Heat play there after he left the band. He like promoted the show in the back of the video store. Maybe somebody else too. But yeah, the video store was like the hub of the Screaming Trees, like until like probably 1990 or so.
Now, as a guitar player, obviously you grow up, you know, idolizing, having heroes. Who's somebody that Gary Lee Conner looks at and says, wow, that's a guitar player? Let's
see. Well, I started out wanting to be a bass player, and I was way into Yes, and Chris Squire was probably my first, like, but yeah, I have weird, let's see. My influence is probably like Hendrix, definitely, just because of the psychedelic.
Sure. Hard not to say him.
And Ron Ashton, probably Greg Ginn, and Steve Howe, oddly enough. It's just kind of an odd one to throw in there. Probably a couple others too. Oh, Greg Sage from the Wipers. That was another big influence.
Yeah. Mark talks about
getting into the Wipers right around that time. And we actually met him. He was going to produce one of our records, but it didn't end up happening.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a lot of punk, old rock, psychedelic stuff, and then some prog put in there. If I can't play anywhere near, I always wish I could play like Steve Howe, but I mean, I'm just like, I sort of just like fake it, you know, like it's weird because when I sit down with my thing with guitar has always been, I learned playing guitar by just like playing and not copying, like, you know, like at some point we had a cover band, I had to learn other songs, but I still do that. Like I sit around and play and I'm like, well, can I do that? Like and record it, you know, I punch in a million times, you know, to get the parts I want usually. But yeah, I just like just play what's coming out of my head. I don't like sit down and play a song very often. And then I did that years and years ago, and that was how I learned to play, you know.
Well, you certainly do a good homage to Pete Townsend, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I don't know why I started doing that. It was weird because we had our cover bands that Van and I had, and Mark Pickrell too. We had two different ones, him and those guys, and the Explosive Generation. Those was like 82, 83, 84, right before the band started. And, you know, we played a lot. We played like Beatles stuff, punk rock stuff, you know, like Sex Pistols or Black Flag. And then once in a while we got like played like Def Leppard because you're trying to play dances.
Yeah.
Or like Black Sabbath, you know.
Give the people what they want, right? Give the people what they want.
But I just stood there and played. And actually the very first time we played in front of people, it was like we played like a group home, like for you know, mentally disabled people.
Yeah.
Because that was like, hey, I know, we'll play, you know, somebody new work there or something. Yeah. And the people really liked it. We kind of stood there and played. There's actually a tape of it that Mark hid. I don't know whatever happened to it. He had the tape.
That one Screaming Trees gig at the group home.
Yeah. Huh? Yeah, but that was not really, I wouldn't consider that a real show. The first show we ever played for a real show was in Olympia. And it had been set up through Calvin Johnson from Beat Happening. And it was this place called Gesco, which was, and there were, we were open, and who did we open for then? The 28th day. It was on Mother's Day in 1986. And for some reason something just clicked, and everyone was after the show was like, man, you're like wild man. I was like, oh, okay. And then the next show we played the same place and did it again. And suddenly after, it's weird because years later it sort of became like obligation to like, I have to go crazy. I can't just play.
Right. You got to give the people a show. Sure.
Yeah, I still did that in the later years, but it was kind of the playing wise, the nicest time when we had Josh home in the band.
Yeah.
I was able to, for the first time, actually to play and realize that, hey, I can actually play pretty good. You know?
Right. And not
instead of just like going crazy and smashing stuff and doing windmills. I found myself
the other night, going out, hopping in the pool at night with my wife, and we put some music on out there. And I literally, the more I listened to Mother Love Bone, and this might sound selfish, the more, and I even came out and remember telling my wife this, I wish, and nothing against Pearl Jam, but I would have rather had Mother Love Bone.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, I would agree with that.
You know, I just love what they were doing. And you know what? Andy seemed pretty unabashed about not caring about coming across as like wanting to be this bigger than life front man. He wanted to do that. I don't think he was trying to be pretentious. I don't think he was trying to act like he didn't want that.
In fact, I always thought he was the most unpretentious guy in the band, maybe. Like, just because of knowing what they'd done before, and like, you know, I don't know, but yeah, I don't know. I think that's the thing with Mother Love Bone, is kind of having the edge of almost like a metal parody.
Yeah,
you know, it's like,
but it worked. It worked. It really did work.
Would it have worked on the same level as like Pearl Jam though? That's hard to say. Over the long
timeline. Yeah,
because
or might it have just turned into exactly what needed cleansing in the '80s that you guys
right, and that was like part of that whole grunge thing, was a huge cleansing of this like hair metal. You know,
yeah,
it has some great songs, and I like Van Halen a lot.
Well, there did need to be a cleansing, and I'm not going to knock Van Halen because I'm hoping for that DNA testing so I can see a little bit of that. Right. I want to see a little bit of that 1984 money, you know, or some Panama.
I've always appreciated a lot of Van Halen songs. I mean, David Lee Roth is like sort of like, I don't know if I would want to run into him or not.
Yeah, and his live performances over the last couple of years, he seems to be more like a little more like kind of one of those like, hey, you know what I mean? Yeah. Like he's almost more like Huckster at this point. It's almost become like he's like a parody of himself, you know? It's
right. And you can't really, one, they had great songs, and two, like Eddie Van Halen was like so original of a guitar player. I mean, you can't, you know, he influenced so many people too. So
what was it about him that made him original as a guitar player that you would say? Is it his tone? Is it unmistakable?
Yeah, probably. It's probably the like more like just like instead of playing, a lot of things like the hammer-ons and just the, you know, I mean, a lot of that stuff is sort of like maybe had its roots in like Hendrix type stuff, where you know, moving the guitar around, doing things, you know, like when he played this back, you know, behind his back or with his tongue or something.
Right.
Maybe, you know, and the whammy bar thing, he definitely, you know, I've hardly ever used one of those.
Yeah. Now, I had seen some things online, you know, keeping up with you guys, like via Facebook and everything, that your brother Van had some health problems. How is Van at this point?
He's trying to recover. I don't know. What happened was,
what was he felled with? COVID?
No. Well, at some point, yes, but that wasn't what started it. He about 10 years ago, he had stomach surgery, like, you know, like don't ever get that, man. He weighs 140 pounds now and he can't gain any weight.
Oh.
And he weighed 400 at one point.
So you're saying that he had one of those like gastric bypass?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And anyway, about in December, he got a stomach ulcer. I don't know. I guess it was probably caused from it. Yeah. And he had to have surgery. And plus he fell down and hurt himself. And he was like completely like in a coma, like for about 2 or 3 weeks. And when he came out, he couldn't talk or walk. And then he was trying to walk and stuff. But then in the middle of probably like February or March, he got COVID and had more problems, like complications from the surgery. And he was out with that for a long time. And he's still having a hell of a time walking. And
God.
Yeah, he's not doing very well overall, but he is right now. He's at least trying to recover.
Well, our thoughts and prayers definitely go out to him for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Hopefully.
Yeah, extremely talented guy. Do you guys get to see much of each other these days?
Yeah, I usually, a lot before he had his health problems. We were talking like every, few days on the phone. I still talk to him. Well, he's just having so many problems. It's not just like health problems, other personal problems too. So
we all go through them. The reason I asked about the health problems is because by day I work as a nurse, so I work in healthcare. Yeah. I don't want to say unfortunately. I don't want to say unfortunately, but unfortunately, and I don't mean that in terms of not wanting to provide care and compassion for people.
Well,
I just mean it's been so daunting post-COVID with staffing and just people not wanting to work and just
I can imagine.
Changed the whole landscape of the game.
Been a nightmare for the healthcare industry. I mean, I didn't even want to go to the doctor at all. I mean, I finally went to the dentist the other day because I had a crown fell off. It's like, I want to go.
The wife just did too. Now, did you survive pretty good through the COVID though, man?
I haven't got it yet. I haven't got it yet. I've been vaccinated like 4 times and haven't got it.
So you are pro-vaccine.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
What do you think what happened with this vaccine was? I think what happened with this vaccine was a lot of people were either for or against it, but they didn't look at the health and the science behind it. They used more of their political views. Oh, I'm not letting the government tell me that I got to have something.
The other part of it is that guy back in England, back around 2000, who started the anti-vaxxer thing.
Right.
He was the reason he started it was because he had a measles vaccine that he wanted to sell, and so he started this big thing about how they cause autism, and then the British press picked up on that, and that was like caused the anti-vaxxer movement that was like up to about 2015 and 2016, and then Trump like just took it and ran with it.
Yeah,
refusing to wear a mask was probably one of the worst things.
Now, if that fight had come off, who wins, Mark Lanegan or Gallagher brother?
Oh, if Mark was in good shape, it would probably be hard to tell. But considering the shape Mark was in at the time, he probably would have just like fallen.
He might have got dropped by Liam or Noel or whatever the hell one came at him.
For all the talk, Mark never really. We never saw him fight with anyone. The few times he did, he got either gave up or got his ass kicked. I don't know. Yeah. He was a big big talker, but not an actual.
Right.
Now, he could really just scare you though. But the thing with Mark was he was the nicest guy you ever could meet, and he was also the nastiest guy.
Yeah, I get that. Having made my way through his book, I do think the one thing that I do like is that he's pretty self-deprecating in areas in the story where he needs to be.
And that's the thing that people like say about like when he ripped you apart. It wasn't. I never even read. I read parts of it, so I know there's a lot of bad shit about me in there.
What kind of terms were you guys on though at the time of his passing? Had you mended fences?
Yeah. See, I don't know what he was on at the time he wrote the book. I heard rumors, or at least stuff from people who knew him very well. Maybe he was doing like meth.
Yeah. A little paranoia, a little convoluted thought process.
It reeks of that kind of thing because, before that, we talked like about 10 years ago when the band was thinking about getting back together, or just decided not to, about 2013 or something. About the time that Last Words album came out, and then I always like follow his solo career. I was like, I really, love what he's doing, and it's like cool he's keeping the name around, even though he didn't want to fucking like have anything to do with it.
Sure.
He probably didn't like when people said "Screaming Trees" singer. He wouldn't have liked his obituary.
Right. Well, do you think in this day and age where you see bands like I use Kiss, for instance, on these 4 or 5 year farewell tours, just raking in the dough. Now, I know you guys never achieved that kind of commercial success, but would you think, though, eventually have gotten back together and gone out for the quote unquote, last hurrah, the big reunion tour, the Screaming Trees are getting back together again, like how Pantera's doing right now?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, there's not surviving members.
It would have had to been a rainy or a cold day in hell for Lanegan to get back. Although, the thing is, the last I heard from him, like, I hadn't heard from him for years, and then the book hit, and I was like, Jesus. And the thing that hurt me most in the book, that I said, I didn't read it, but the part I read was saying that the old stuff, like SSC stuff, was complete shit. Talking about how shitty the music was.
Yeah.
Personally, we had problems, and you can't get around that, and we were friends.
What band doesn't, though? I mean,
but mostly, we worked together, and we tried, and I, love all that old stuff, and then, I like try to celebrate all the old music and stuff.
I couldn't agree more. Would you consider that Sweet Oblivion album I mean, you know, I know I'm putting you in a tough position, you know, tooting your own horn, but do you think that that Sweet Oblivion album is you guys' masterpiece?
I think Dust is, because that was what we.
Okay.
Sweet Oblivion was close, but Dust is what we want. You know, we always wanted to make an album that was like an old classic record. You know,
right.
Has like lots of different, you know, instrument stuff. We had George Akulius was really helpful, like because he was a, you know, he wasn't just a producer, like an engineer. He was like helped arrange the songs, you know, brought in all sorts of extra, you know, he brought in like bandmate Tench, the guy from Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. I don't know how.
Yeah.
That was one of the coolest for years. Of the record was to get him to play on it. He played like Mellotron on that one song, Traveler. That was like dream come true. So yeah, Dust to me was like the album we always wanted to make. I think Mark probably felt that way too, except for he must have always had sort of a knowing that he really didn't have much involvement in it. Right. And the other thing is when it came time for him to sing, I mean, the whole time we've been working on that record, writing the songs, he'd just been out of it and gone. But then he was in the studio all the time with us, and we actually got along pretty well in the studio. But when it came time for him to sing, he just physically, it's weird. He sang Sweet Oblivion in about 3 days when he was massively hungover, and he might have been doing dope some, but it was mostly alcohol at the time.
Yeah.
But when it came time to sing on Dust, he just, I don't know, his voice is less edgy than it is on Sweet Oblivion. I think as far as Mark's singing, Sweet Oblivion definitely would be masterpiece for his singing.
When Mark is going through all of his demons, and you guys as a band are acutely aware that this is going on, is there anybody in the band or anybody in your circle at that time that can sit Mark down and try to get through to him at this point, or is it just
not that I know? I mean, because he was like the boss of the band, so it's like, you know, and the guy who's in charge is out of it. So that's kind of difficult. And nobody was ever able to, you know, take that reign from him. Is why, you know, maybe, and like, oh, the one time we did tell Mark we were quitting the band was like 1995, right before we did Dust. And we couldn't get, you know, we hadn't got George Akulius as a producer yet. It was like, what's going to happen?
Right.
And Pam and me were just like, let's just quit and maybe we'll start a different band with, you know, us and maybe a different singer. We wouldn't ever. I mean, at some point, me and Lanegan made an agreement. I don't know if it was ever in writing that we'd never be Screaming Trees without either me or him. Because at one point we were actually going to be like Donna Dresch, who played bass with us in 1988, and she had a friend who was a drummer, and they were going to be the rhythm section basically. Because Van in 1990, this was the second time he almost quit. He didn't actually say he was quitting, but he was playing bass with Dinosaur Jr.
Dinosaur Jr. Yep.
Had taken off or got canned around the loop. And I guess they would fight a lot. I heard some nice fight things about Dinosaur Jr. That was fun. But yeah, so Van was gonna play with Dinosaur Jr. He was actually making money with them. Right. And that's the thing. It's like, and he had like the main reason he quit the band is because he got married, because I guess he had to get married. He had his son Ulysses, who's like in his 30s now. But
some kind of shotgun wedding thing going on there.
Well, not shotgun, but he had he had no money, and he had to work 3 jobs. And it's like, when you're working 3 jobs, you can, let's go on tour for 2 months. It's like, no, I can't do that.
Not economically feasible.
But then he was like actually playing with Jay and making money. And what happened is like finally, I got so upset the first time he quit, you know, and really affected me a lot. And then we hooked up with Ask Dan Peters, who was not doing a lot with Mudhoney. He played with Nirvana for a while, and you know, we got him to play with us if Van would come back. And I, you know, was like, come on, man, I got Dan Peters. But then we ended up doing the Drunken Insane tour after the band wreck with Dan Peters, which worked out okay. But we ended up cutting it short and then came back. And I think that was probably the one time, like Mark says something in the book about like breaking up like around 1991. I don't really remember anything about that. Him talking about quitting. I remember a couple of years earlier, right before he got signed.
Maybe it was his own psychosis telling him that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember if he actually talked to me about it. I think I would have been a lot more upset if I knew that he wanted to quit.
Yeah.
In 91, but that's when we got Barrett and everything gelled back together. And
Barrett Martin out there in Washington. His hair has its own zip code or no?
Yeah, I think well, it didn't because he cut. Well, after like sometime in the mid-90s, he cut his hair, and he always had it short for years and years. Yeah. And then like about a year or two ago, I saw a picture of him. It's like he's like Gandalf. He's like got this huge gray head of hair.
It's impressive though at his age to still be that fruitful with his coif.
I get my hair to grow long, and it's like I have hair, but it's just getting to grow. My hair used to be like. Really
I remember. Yeah, I remember. Now, let me ask you this. With so many bands now in the current music scene, with album sales not what they used to be and people not going out and buying CDs, obviously a lot of these bands generate their revenue off of going out and playing live.
Oh, yeah.
You still go out and see live music at all?
No, well, I live in the middle of nowhere in West Texas, so
not a lot of
even if I wanted to, yeah.
Okay, so obviously over the years you probably have seen a lot of great bands live. If you could put together a dream bill that people out there would know, who'd be your opener and your headliner? Of bands that you saw live that were phenomenal.
Oh, that I saw live? Nirvana probably. They were like the best live band I ever saw. Little teeny tiny. Oh man, there was like seeing the Who like in 1960.
And then who opens for them on your dream bill? Who opens for Nirvana that night?
Oh, who else?
Obviously, taking aside,
one of my favorite bands. Love Battery from Seattle.
Okay.
They actually played my wife and our wedding. We got them to play.
Really?
Yeah, they were like on tour, and they didn't think they could do it, but then like we had money, we paid for them to fly back to Seattle to play the wedding, and they did. So yeah, I actually got our wedding pictures has Love Battery.
Yeah, I'm an ordained minister too. Nowadays, it's pretty laughable. You can actually just get your card and pretty much marry people and sign marriage certificates at will. Yeah. I married my son a couple of years ago, and
really? No kidding.
It's pretty much. I'm actually thinking of maybe taking this whole look and just renting myself out and doing like David Lee Roth officiates.
Yeah, there you go.
I'll even finish it off with singing a little "Ain't Talking About Love" if I have to.
Yeah. You got way more hair than David Lee Roth.
Nowadays, I do. Nowadays, I do. Yeah, that's for sure. So at the time that you finally stop really putting out Screaming Trees albums, is there a point in time when you really were started to think about just never making music? Was there ever a point in time when you wanted to stop making music?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, I think we had sort of a cool down period there. When '97, we did a few shows like in Seattle area and West Coast, kind of extended like for Dust. Then we stopped doing much at all, except I finally started writing songs again that I liked for fun. I went back to New York, wrote a bunch of songs, and that was the stuff that ended up coming out on that Last Words record. We recorded some,
great album.
Shows. We did like Bumper Shoot one year and played the Showbox like in 98 again. 98. And then the last show we had, I didn't even know it was gonna be our last show, was that Experience Music Project, the thing that's the Mopop place in Seattle now. And that we played the show, and like we got paid $65,000, which was way the hell more than we probably got paid like $10,000 maybe once or twice.
Yeah,
but it was suddenly like, we play the show, get $10,000. We probably made like $5,000 a piece by the time everyone got paid. And stuff like that. But it seemed like I figure how much money I made an hour. It'd be like a huge amount, right?
Yeah.
And then and then after the show, and the dressing room was like, "Oh, you guys are breaking up," and I was like, "What?" I really wasn't upset because at that point it was just kind of like, yeah, I guess, because I had been living in New York and Van was married and he had kids, and we weren't really, and every time we'd have to do something, we'd have to like fly across the country.
Yeah.
And at that point too, Lanegan was living in Los Angeles, so and then and then nothing really happened. We went home, and that was when I moved to Texas. So I was really out of touch with people. I wasn't even in New York. I was
just went into hiding, hibernated.
Yeah, totally. And every once in a while, like probably 2 or 3 times, Mark would call me up and say, "Oh, we were thinking about doing a record together, just me and him, and like we were talking about getting who was it? Somebody who produced that Soft Bullet, Flaming Lips record, in that year, because thinking of doing something a little bit more on that vein." But then I stopped hearing from him. I guess he did start doing the Queens of the Stone Age thing, and I didn't hear from him again for like 10 years. yeah, but during that time, like the 2000s, I wrote songs, but I was just like, I hated, I didn't even like to listen to music. I hated doing stuff. And, you know, I contacted a couple of people trying to do some demos, but nobody was really interested. And then finally in late 2000s, about 15 years ago, I like got a big royalty check for like one of the first times ever, like $10,000 or something. I was like, I'll buy some, you know, equipment and I realized that I actually like could, you know, do stuff on a computer at home.
Sure.
The technology had come that far, you know. And so I got a bunch of stuff and started recording. It took me a couple of years, and I did my first what I call the micro.gnome record. And then later I just started using my name. But but I still go by the nickname micro.gnome for stuff.
Right.
Just,
yeah.
so
Yeah. It works. It works.
Yeah. Yeah, I just thought it's weird because I thought of that name like as a playlist for like a bunch of
even with only one hallucinogenic experience under your belt, it still works. Yeah. It does.
Well, because that's my you know, my main love over the years has been psychedelic 60s.
Yeah, I also the one song off Sweet Oblivion that really speaks to me, believe it or not, that really just seems like a slice of psychedelia is Julie Paradise.
Oh yeah, and
that song's very weird and trippy to me, but I love it.
That's one of the, there's two songs that I didn't have anything to do with writing, and that's one of them. The other was Dollar Bill.
I was hoping you were going to say that you were going to tell me that you hated it.
No, I love it's fun, really fun to play. I love playing Julie Paradise. I was like, yeah, but Dollar Bill, I was in the room when Van and Mark were working on it, and then
so that's their
Van and Mark wrote that somewhere else, and I was like, yeah, that's actually one of my favorite Screaming Tree songs, Julie Paradise.
Now you also did on that album. You also did on that album, which. Geez, especially having read Mark's story, he certainly was no saint. So this is kind of a big surprise to me. But you guys covered "There'll Be Peace in the Valley" on that album.
Yeah,
where did that idea come from? And where did that idea come to do a religious song?
It was Mark's idea, and you know, I'd probably heard it. You know, it's just one of those like songs that's around forever.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It was Lanegan's idea. I mean, it makes sense. But it was funny. The backup vocals were the funniest part. The high. I think we just kind of like sang it all at the same time.
Yeah, the harmonizing. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, you know, we always like to do different stuff. That was just like, I can't remember when we recorded it. It was for a B-side or something, you know.
You pulled it off. You pulled it off.
Yeah, we played it live once with a show box. It was 97 or 98, and we actually had Mark Pickerel playing drums and Mike McCready playing guitar with us.
Yeah.
And we played Peace in the Valley. I don't know if there's a recording.
Do you think all these drummers that Pearl Jam has been through, do you think that I read somewhere where a rock journalist was quoted as saying that Matt Cameron, and I think Eddie Vedder said this himself, Matt Cameron has made that band a better band. Do you think Matt Cameron is
probably? I mean, he's like, to me, he's like Bill Bruford or something, you know, the kind of prog drummer who could play just about anything, you know.
Yeah, he really is.
Yeah.
Now you said earlier about Nirvana being one of the best bands. We've obviously sung the praises of Kurt on here a few times. Yeah. What was it about, and he's still hailed as one of the great songwriters, what was it that Kurt, and where do you think it came from, that he was able to tap into to craft songs that other people didn't see or couldn't craft? What was it about him that you got off of him as a person that you think that made him such a great songwriter?
Yeah, I don't know. Probably he must have just loved music, I guess. I don't know. That's why and also what he listened to. I don't know what he listened to when he was a kid, but it was obviously, because that's what, you know, when you're a songwriter, everything goes into you, and you might be like doing nothing for a year, but a little music you listen to like kind of congeals in your head, and then it's a synthesis of all this stuff. So I don't know. I mean, just that, and the fact that he obviously wasn't like, I'm going to be like huge rock star or something like that.
Right.
That kind of, you know, even though, you know, obviously huge rock stars can write great songs. I mean, you know, look at David Bowie. I mean, he's like, you know, it's like, but, yeah, I don't know. It's hard to say, because I didn't know him when he was a little. I haven't like read books about his childhood or something.
When they have a short career like they did, and obviously it ended unfortunately with Kurt committing suicide, allegedly. I'll say committing suicide, because you know we don't know, and there are theories swirling around out there.
Yeah, no.
And but with it ending as quickly as they did, and them really having a relatively small catalog and not really a lot of material out there that the market had access to, do you think that Kurt when they went into the Hall of Fame, was it deserved, or did they not have enough longevity?
I think they deserved, just because they changed music, and it was sort of the last big, because there was like, the 60s stuff,
right?
And there was like the punk rock, and then even though it had a lot of the roots and punk stuff, the Nirvana and the whole, Seattle music scene,
right,
changed everything. And it's like, it's weird years later, because like, I mean, it's only been the last like maybe like 5 or 10 years I've realized, like, gee.
I got you froze there for a minute.
The 80s,
There you go.
Yeah, it's really
up on me for a minute there.
It's weird.
Now, when what was I just going to ask you? Your video froze up for a minute. When when Kurt passes away, is it one of those things that you think put other people on notice in that scene, or was it just business as usual? Did it really change anybody that you're aware of from that scene, or the passing of Lane, or the passing of Andy? Did it ever really have an impact on anybody to the point where you think they cleaned up because of it?
Well, it sure didn't on some. I mean, it didn't on Mark. He just kept going. So
yeah,
which is why I was amazed that he made it, at least till the end of the 90s. I mean, I didn't really know. I know he had ups and downs during the 20 years after that, but yeah, not that I know of. People just kept going, I think
it's sad. It really is sad.
Yeah. Well, one guy who I don't know much about his personal, but like Mark Arm, I know when Mudhoney started, he was like doing dope and stuff.
Yeah.
And he seems like he's doing. I mean, just turned 60 a while back.
He looks great.
They're still playing and stuff. So I don't know. He's doing something right, I guess.
Now, back during the craze of the MTV and the MTV Unplugged, was Screaming Trees ever approached to do an Unplugged, and why the fuck not? Because that
I don't know. I guess we just weren't quite big enough. I guess.
My God, that would have been fantastic.
Yeah, I know.
I feel like if there was a band that would have been great in that, it would have been.
Yeah, it would have been. You're right. It would have been. I mean, I
feel like a lot of those songs would have you would have been able to really pull them off, and the arrangements of them acoustically would have been.
Yeah, and Barrett would have tried to play like every instrument in the world. He always like, you have to play this cello and like the French horn, and he tried to play just about everything. Cool. Especially in the Nirvana. You had to restrain him a little bit. It's like, we don't need any of that stuff.
Well, what was Novoselic pulling out in Nirvana? He even busted out the accordion, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's right. He played the accordion.
Yeah, and Jesus Doesn't Want Me for a Sunbeam. Yeah, played a little accordion. You know what? As I look at myself here in the video, I think I've morphed into more Andy Wood than David Lee Roth right here.
Yes, I only met him one time, but yeah.
You've met David Lee Roth, okay?
Yeah. Not David Lee Roth, no. Andy Wood. I met him one time when we were recording Buzz Factory. He came down to the studio. Yeah, I don't know. And I saw him live in a different time too. So
now, there's a point in Mark's book where he tells a story about, and I'm paraphrasing it. I don't remember. Forgive me. I don't remember the album he was talking about. But what was the album that Chris Cornell helped produce? Because he told a story. Uncle Anesthesia. He told a story about Chris Cornell, kind of quote unquote, being in the studio, which he perceived as kind of keeping him on the straight and narrow. What exactly was it? What exactly was it that Chris provided back then for Mark?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I mean, the main reason we hooked up with him, I thought, was because he knew our band and we were going to record with Terry Date, and it was our first time in a really big studio. I mean, mostly we'd done stuff.
Terry Date, producer.
Yeah, and then we'd done Buzz Factory and with and Dino at Reciprocal, which was not. It did have a bigger. Had I think 16 or 24 track as opposed to 8 track, but but then we were like in the big like London Bridge, which is now like famous studio.
Oh sure, yeah.
I read about that. It's like that's the place. It's a famous studio. It's just it's like in a kind of warehouse area or something.
In the context that I took it when he was describing it, it almost sounded like. It was more of like a, big brother looking after a little brother type thing. So I wondered, did he look at Chris a certain way? And did the whole scene look at Chris a certain way? Because I think the thing that was most surprising about Chris's death is that everybody kind of like looked at him as like, here's a guy with his shit together out of anybody in the scene.
Probably
I
at
mean,
that time, because they, you know, they got an A&M and they were like, you know, on their way up, maybe, you don't know. I mean, you know, they, in retrospect, they didn't, you know, they kind of like came in after Nirvana and Pearl Jam, because, you know, maybe it was just the timing of when the records came out and stuff. But you know, they kind of rode that. I don't know if the certain Soundgarden, I mean, nobody would have got big. It wouldn't have been for Nirvana. Pearl Jam would have been like I think, like, oh, they were from Seattle. But Soundgarden too, I think they, you know, they would have been like, you know, revered probably in the underground or something, but I don't think they would have. Nirvana just had something that was cool.
Nirvana wasn't going to miss. Nirvana was going to resonate with people.
But but Soundgarden, and Chris, he just hung around. He had to leave partway through because they were going on tour, like when we got close to the mixing. But he just was around to make sure that Terry Date didn't turn us into a metal band, I guess. Was
because he is famous
how that could have happened musically. Because I mean,
right? He's the guy behind all those Pantera albums and a lot of
the thing with
stuff, heavy stuff, usually.
And the thing with the Uncle Anesthesia stuff is it's definitely still rooted in the psychedelic stuff that I was writing in Ellensburg on the SST records.
Right.
And you know, my main problem with that record is just that I don't think it was mixed. We should have had somebody else mix it. Maybe someday we could remix it, because it was like, I think everyone, you know, usually that's what we do before that. But our other like epic records, who were mixed by somebody else, seem to have a much more, you know, it's got a different viewpoint. And I hate mixing stuff. I always have to mix my own stuff now. But it's like, I don't know what I'm doing. Does that sound good or sound like crap? You know, I don't know.
Right. I watched some documentary where Chris Cornell said that was what he respected the most about Andy, was where he would overanalyze things, and Andy was very free-spirited creatively. You know, I mean, didn't over-edit, didn't overanalyze things, didn't, you know, sort of micromanage his music, you know.
Yeah,
but then sometimes don't you? But then sometimes you do need someone to reel you in, though, don't you?
That's what we had. Andy Wallace, who mixed Nevermind. That was like, we were lucky enough to have him on both Dust and Sweet Oblivion. And I just, you know, people probably think, oh, it's commercial sounding weird, but I think it made it sound big and really good, you know, and you could hear everything.
Yeah.
And it's not like, there was a weird thing like in the 80s with the new like reverbs and a lot of those big drum sounds, like the gated drums, like going, it's like Phil Collins, like so many, like the replacements. They had that on all their damn records. It's like, what the hell are you thinking when you're recording these guys? It'd be interesting to hear that stuff remixed, you know.
Now, what's the Screaming? What do you think the Screaming Trees legacy is on music, and what would you like it to be? What would you like to be remembered for, or as?
Well, I just want to be remembered as just a band that, you know, I guess the kind of bands that I would discover, you know, like psychedelic bands that not many people heard of. I mean, we had a little more. It's weird to think that we had more success than a lot of the bands that I loved. You know, like the 13 Full Elevators, for instance. You know, I mean, I don't know how many records they had, so we probably maybe we might have sold more records than them. I don't know. Yeah, but you know, they were like one of the bands.
I would probably guess that you guys probably did.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know exactly how many records we sold. All I know is back in the 90s, we supposedly had sold like 300,000 Sweet Oblivion. Now, I've never got anyone tell me that we had a gold record.
Yeah,
that's maybe someday we'll get it up to. Yeah, it might be. You know, it's getting a little further up there. But you know, and it's kind of like we actually make a little bit of money nowadays. It's like, you know, probably make like maybe $10,000-$15,000 a year from the band, which back then, even like, you know, at the end of the 90s, it was just like, no way. We finally recouped enough to make mostly on publishing. You know, we still don't make any money from the actual albums.
Yeah, yeah. I don't envy being in that business, because it does seem like everybody's kind of grabbing for the same thing,
and it's just like, you know, having to do it because you think you're gonna make a living is just it's a. And
what would you like people to remember? What would you like people to remember? You know, because obviously there's always going to be stories out there. And Mark himself told a lot of disparaging stuff about himself. But what would be the best characteristic that you could say that you hope people remember Mark Lanegan for?
I guess his voice. I mean, his voice was just the most amazing thing. I still like listen to anything he's singing. I remember people used to say he could sing the phone book. That was way back. I remember somebody saying
absolutely, yeah.
80s or something. But yeah, I mean, he didn't know. I mean, and it wasn't like he didn't know it was natural, but I guess it was, because if you listen to Other Worlds, our very first, those are, even though it was released in 88, that was our first recorded, you would think that guy can't really sing very well. Is possible. But then, like, even this next record, Clairvoyance, is suddenly like, man, he used to get compared to Jim Morrison a lot after, like, but he hated it at some point. But yeah,
I'm sure he probably hated the comparison, though.
Yeah, of course he did. He hated it.
He seems like a guy who wants to be seen as Mark Lanegan.
But he used to listen to The Doors a lot. So.
Yeah. I can't help, I don't think, but sometimes have your influences rub off on you a bit. You know, I mean,
yeah, but
and I don't think that's necessarily being a copycat, like like paying homage to people that have influenced you. You know, I mean,
no, not at all. I mean, it's just like, it's not you're like exactly copying people. I mean, that's how you make new stuff. Is like you take old stuff and you change it up enough so it's new.
Yep. Now, what does the Microdot Gnome have on the horizon? Are you working on anything?
Yeah, I'm working on a new record. I've been working on it for about a year, because I was working on it last summer. It's called Truth Eater. There's one song on Bandcamp that I finished called Truth Eater, the title track, and then I had a bunch of stuff. The personal stuff came up, and I finally started working on it again about a month ago. I'm hopefully finishing it by my 60th birthday, which is August 22nd. So
as long as you finish it by my 60th birthday, so you got to
there you go, 10 years. Yeah, I mean, that's that's all I really care about nowadays, is like my family, and just like wanting to keep doing music and keep keep recording as many records as I can until I'm too old or too.
Now, what kind of project is this going to be? Is this a fully realized album or an EP, or what is this?
It's going to be 10, probably 10 songs. It looks like.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's going to be a little bit less psychedelic, not by like design, just sort of ends up being that way. I mean, that's over time. I listen to music and it like goes in my head, and then what comes out is like probably a synthesis of all the stuff I've been listening to. And of course, the stuff that I've listened to for 50 years or something has a lot more.
Sure, yeah.
Bass, I listen to as much rock music as I can. It's weird because like my wife has a huge record collection. I never listened to the albums. Yeah. I was listening to Spotify a lot. Now I switched over to a Tidal, not just because of the thing with that Joe Rogan thing, but because also they pay way more like money to the artist.
And so you're mostly using your phone and or computer.
Yeah,
or
pretty much all.
Your stereo.
Yeah, but since I've done that, I started listening to a lot of new music. I mean, I think of like all the rock music, like from way back to the 60s and even 50s.
Right.
Like it's a gigantic treasure chest that there's no bottom to. Because even nowadays I discover stuff I've never heard before.
But I mean, Gary, did you ever think back when you were a kid and you were slapping your money down on a counter for an album that you had to have, that you would fast forward to this time and just be able to get access to any music at the drop of a hat on like an Apple Music or Spotify? It's crazy.
Between that and my recording setup, I do everything on the computer. I use the guitar, like Amplitude modeling and stuff. I try like doing stuff to amps, and I just can't make it sound as good as the,
Is it twofold though? Did technology also really kind of chop the music industry off at the knees a little bit though too?
Yeah, and the access to like being able to distribute your music online, although they're doing their best to try to stop it. I mean, by like, it's like Spotify and those type of things are great, but on the other hand, it's like there's so many things on there trying to get yourself attention is easy.
So where did you stand like when like a guy like Lars is going after Napster? Did you agree with him or?
Not really. I mean, I actually I downloaded a lot of stuff from Napster, although it was mostly like really obscure psychedelic stuff.
Right. I did too. I mean, I think we were all burning CDs and, oh, hey, everybody's going to, all of a sudden we can got access to free music. Where do I go? I mean,
it seemed like at the time, it seemed like a real democratization of music. And I think even what was further and cooler was things like, I think the best of all the like, things to like release your music on is Bandcamp, at least in my experience. They don't really have any big rules that the only thing that sucks is they don't do you know, streaming, which probably is, on the one hand, is good because then they just turn into another Spotify. But on the other hand, it makes, you know, you have to, if you want your stuff on those things, you have to do something else. Like I've been using TuneCore for quite a few years. And the thing with them is they charge like, it's like $50 a record per year. So, and like I probably make less than I pay in fees, you know? So it's just kind of like,
I just want to afford a pack. After 5 years, you'll be able to afford a pack of gum, you know? Like,
yeah, exactly. So, you know, but yeah, I don't know for sure, but I'd say there's probably more music out there than there ever has been before, like new music. And
but very tough for a young up and coming band though to really say, hey, we're gonna go all in and go out to LA and get a record contract. I mean, that lifestyle doesn't exist anymore. No, I mean,
well, the thing in the '80s is all the bands had that we didn't even realize it was the college radio. That's what really pushed the, like, you know, and all those guys that worked in college radio, a lot of those are the people who were working in the major labels in the early 90s. Yeah, like I mean, if you polled like all people who were working like in the major labels in the early 90s, like most of them got their start in college radio. My wife was a DJ in college
and then through most of the 80s and a lot of the 90s, MTV was also still playing music videos too, so you were getting your you know,
we actually had Nearly Lost You was like the
great video,
but it had to share with Paul Westerberg. It was others that they had 2 singles that were released right about the same time from the singles album in '92, and the Paul Westerberg was the other one. So we only got half the plays that we would have got if we had been the exclusive. First it was the Buzz in, then they changed to the Buzz Clip.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yep. And then they had like a, you know, 180 minutes or whatever they had. They had their alternative show on there. Right. But at least they had formats. They had their Headbangers Ball. You know what I mean? Like they had.
At least they played music. I don't know what they do now.
And they actually play music. Now I think it's just a lot of reality TV, I think, is what it's pretty much.
No, MTV made a big difference. And 120 minutes was, you know.
120 minutes. That's what it was. Yeah.
That, like, a lot of the stuff I discovered, I saw in 120 minutes.
Yeah.
So, you know,
likewise. I did too. Headbangers Ball. The same thing.
Music. Back in the 80s, the way you discovered music was, I guess you could be lucky enough to live somewhere where you could go to shows. You know, or you could go to a record store, and hopefully it was a good record store here, like Import Bin, or you live in a town with a college radio station, which we didn't, or reading reviews in magazines. That's how I discovered a lot of stuff. Or just thinking, oh, this has a really cool cover, I'll buy it.
Yeah. Well, what's happened now, I've noticed down here, is when I go to the mall, we've only really got one of the chain places left, and it's an FYE, the dreaded FYE. And you go in there, and it's pretty much now just a novelty / toy store, and the CD section is like, you know, tiny, and you can't find any back catalog of stuff. You know, you can only find what the person has just put out currently. You know, like if you want to go back and find, like, you know, something that they put out 6 albums ago, unless they order it for you, you're never going to find it on the shelves. That's for sure.
Yeah, right.
And those big market play, those big.
The vinyl thing's really weird too now. I mean, that was like, that was one of the things we had happen with Sweet Oblivion was released by Epic on vinyl, kind of. They wouldn't do a cover. They did a black cover with the CD case or the CD cover in it and called it the One Foot in the Grave Vinyl Edition. This was in 1992.
Yeah.
You know, and they thought vinyl was slowly dead. It probably was for about 10 years or so. Coming back, but
it's making its resurgence, or at least, you know, the industry's trying to get it to make a resurgence.
Yeah,
you know?
We got right in the middle there. It was like when we did Clairvoyance, we put it out on vinyl ourselves with help from Velvetone Records. But then, like, even if especially when our first SST record, that was right when CDs started getting released for, you know, even independent stuff. And so we kind of like were right in the middle of the whole vinyl death, when CDs got to be the main thing.
I like that, the vinyl death. I'm still pissed. I don't even want to give MTV any more shine. I'm not even bringing their goddamn name up. They deprived us of a Screaming Trees Unplugged. Now that I'm thinking about it, I'm pissed, Gary. I'm fucking pissed.
Yeah, I always thought that would be nice years later. At the time, I didn't think about it. I didn't realize how many, a lot of bands.
Everybody else was getting on there doing it, though. Pearl Jam, Nirvana, Alice in Chains.
I think it was, a lot of it was our fault because we just, like, disappeared, like, for a couple of years there.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you feel like the record company did enough to push you guys?
Well,
to promote you as much as the other bands in your area?
Okay. We were having a lot of management problems. Like we quit Susan Silver for some reason. We had a really good manager for a while. Kim White, who we worked with, but then we had some personal problems and we had to move on with Q Prime, the one I was telling you about.
Yeah. I would imagine though that management might have dreaded it a little bit though. Mark probably could have been a very difficult to deal with though during some of his career.
That's why they finally just said, "Fuck you guys, we're not doing."
Yeah.
After '96, that's sort of what happened. But see, in the meantime, they'd done like Def Leppard and
Metallica,
AC/DC, and then they got into Metallica, and also after us, they picked up Smashing Pumpkins. So they were like probably one of the biggest management companies.
Once they got into the Metallica business.
Here we were like dumb shits from Ellensburg.
Well, and I would imagine the management company would probably almost look at it like, you know what I mean, like dealing with Lanegan. It's just like, you know what I mean, like after 10 DWIs, we're not going to fucking insure your car anymore. You know, like I mean,
right.
It's like your car insurance dropping you. You know, I imagine management was pulling their hair out at times.
That's one thing that happened with Dust is it's like, you know, I think what happened was we did the Oasis thing. We did Lollapalooza. We did the Oasis thing. We went to England, and then we came back. We were supposed to do this one show it was a weird festival in Paris. We were just or not Paris, but somewhere in France. We were going to fly over to that, and Mark couldn't do it because of who knows why. And he called them and canceled it. And that was basically, they just said, screw it, we're just going to drop you guys. And they got Epic to release our third single. You know, we could have, if we didn't even really try to do much. And then we spent over a year on tour for Sweet Oblivion, but was Traveler, which is the song without drums with the Ben Montanch playing the Mellotron, which is amazing. But for a single, it's like, maybe if we'd had like dressed it up with drums and stuff.
Right.
But, no, I always thought the single we should have released Look at You. That we actually did that song from Dust with no drums and stuff. And it was right at the last minute. We were like, well, the management thinks we should like do it with drums and stuff. Make it a single. And that really made the song. So, you know, sometimes it helps, sometimes it doesn't.
Do you ever get the itch to play live, or will you play live again? Or are those days over?
Probably not. I don't know. Maybe acoustically. I live so, you know, far. I'm like 250 miles from Dallas, so it's like 4 hours to get over that way. My daughter lives in Denton, which is close to Dallas, so I go over there once in a while. But
is there anybody that you could think where, like, if you were able to, in some type of setting, recreate any of those Screaming Tree songs and sing them? Is there anybody that you could think of that you would want to be sitting alongside of, singing and trying to do Mark Lanegan justice? Or no?
I mean, I would sing, you know, anybody but me singing them would be like,
right. And that's not to say anything against your voice. I'm just wondering if there's anybody that you can.
I mean, I have a passable voice, you know, I'm able to like sing.
Very much so.
Although back in the 80s, I used to sing like the total, like, it was like, well, it was before Billy Corgan. It was more like Sky Saxon on fucking steroids. Some of my old demos were this like kind of out of control. But but over the time, Mark started singing a certain way, and then because I was writing songs that he was singing, I started singing a certain way. So I kind of smoothed my voice out and actually learned to sing, as opposed to like, you know, pretend like I was Bob Dylan on Helium or something. Right.
Well, just to let you know, Gary, I am a front man for hire here. So I mean, anytime I can definitely see
that.
I mean, with my neighborly rough blood running through my veins, man, and me putting on the show and you bringing back the windmill, I think we could really our band, huh?
I have like horrible vertigo though, so I'd probably like end up on my head.
Those days are over with the windmill too. You're saying?
Yeah, right.
Although I don't know, man. If you look down there at my name and see Rex Ruger, that might be a little too glam, though, right? Rex with 3
right. Yeah, kind of.
And probably the exact thing that you were trying to erase from the 80s when you guys came along.
Yeah, right.
But I'm the antithesis of the grunge scene. Although I do look very Andy Wood tonight, though.
Yeah, it's just
I think I'd be doing Andy some justice.
A lot of on Facebook. I have a lot over the last probably 4 years. I've done a lot of acoustic Screaming Tree songs, and stuff like that. Yeah, I started getting the idea to do that in the late '90s, and I actually did 3 or 4 shows just playing acoustically and doing some of my own.
I think people would love it. I think the fans. I think
the fans would. It's just like, you know, well, there's a pandemic, and it's like, you know, personal problems. It's just the fact that I'm such a hermit, and I have anxiety problems, and it's like,
preaching to the choir. Me too.
I was just thinking today or yesterday, like when I was in the shower or something, I was like, man, I'm glad I'm not like, you know, it's one thing to be like sort of well-known kind of for what you did. But actually be famous would just be hellish, especially when you have anxiety and stuff. It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I don't want to deal with anybody.
And now with everything you see in the news and these mass shootings, you know, you walk out your door, it's a crazy world. It's a crazy world out there.
Yeah, the world is completely screwed up. I mean, I don't know. 5 years ago, I thought we were headed like maybe like the new millennium or whatever.
Yeah.
No, nowadays it's like, man, we're headed for the shithole.
We're headed God knows where. Yeah, into the shitter.
Yeah.
I think you said it best right there.
Not just America, the whole world.
Yeah, the whole world. Yeah, the whole goddamn planet. Yeah. Listen, Brett, Gary, I appreciate all the time you've taken on here. I could sit here and talk to you all goddamn night. I love you to death, brother. I do.
I never talk to anybody except like my wife and sometimes Van. So
listen, man. Hey, listen, you don't know how much I appreciate it. Hopefully my Pod Scum audience out there appreciates it because you've been gracious enough to give us a nice chunk of time.
Okay.
If people want to check out micro.gnome, they can check it out on what? All music
Bandcamp. It's on, it's actually listed. Now it's listed under Gary Lee Conner, but yeah, that's the first album was called the Micro.Gnome, and then I switched it to Gary Lee Conner.
And if you've been living under a fucking rock and do not know that he was the guitarist for seminal Seattle band, The Screaming Trees, go back and check all that shit out. Or if not, you should just go throw yourself off a fucking cliff. I don't know what else to tell you. If you don't go back and check out that Screaming Trees stuff, you're doing yourself a huge disservice. That stuff is masterful, Gary. And we as the fans thank you for that, for the music.
Thank you.
That's always what's going to last. That's always what's going to last. And that's always what's going to make Mark Lanegan last. At the end of the day, we've got his music. And guess what? I got that goddamn audio book with his voice forever. I'll always be able to go to sleep at night.
Yeah, all the crap about him that he talked about, everyone talked about. When he died, me and Van were just like, we're just going to remember the good stuff and the music.
Because let it all be bygones, because the music is what you guys gave us. And that's ultimately, at the end of the day, what you want to be remembered for. That's why you did what you did for years.
You don't want to remember like, oh, they were fighting all the time. Remember like, oh, these are great songs.
That's absolutely. And I think at the end of the day, when I asked you previously what the Screaming Trees legacy would be, that's what I would want it to be. Or that's what I would want to hope it would be. Just great crafted songs, great melodies, great hooks. I mean, just a great voice, great harmonizing. I mean, you guys were the complete package in my book.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah,
I really. I thank you for all the time you gave us tonight. I hope you had a good time on Pod Scum.
Yeah,
I hope we can do it again sometime, brother. I'd love to.
Okay, let me know.
I could sit here and shoot the shit with you for. Well, I have shot the shit with you for hours, but I hope to do it again sometime. Continued thoughts and prayers for your brother, man. Give him our best, man.
I don't know. Okay.
Yeah, and it was great talking to you, Gary. Thank you very much.
Too, man. Take it easy.
Talk to you later, brother.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
There you have it there, folks. Gary Lee Conner. Legendary. Yeah, I'm going to say it now. Legendary guitar player for the Screaming Trees. Now goes under the moniker of the Micro.Gnome. Go on all music platforms. He specifically mentioned Bandcamp. You can find him on Facebook. I'm sure you can go back and find all that Screaming Tree shit. Believe me, I listen to it like crazy. Mark Lanegan, one of the greatest rock voices in the history of music. You try to tell me otherwise, let's fucking go. Let's fucking go. Mark Lanegan belongs up on that Seattle Mount Rushmore. He's right up there with all those guys whose names you do know. Your Eddie Vedders, your Kurt Cobains, your Chris Cornells. Mark Lanegan belongs there. He may even bump a few of those guys off. How do you like that? That's right. And that guy that I just talked to, Gary Lee Conner, that's his lead guitar player, in case you didn't fucking know. That's right. King of the Seattle Windmill. And we love him. We appreciate him spending goddamn near 2 hours with us, man. I hope you out there, the Pod Scum audience, enjoyed that. And until I see you guys all again next time, man, this is Rex Ruger, a.k.a. David Lee Roth Jr., the son of glam, wishing you guys a wop, bop, loo, bop, wop, bang, boom. A good night. See you next time on Pod Scum. Love you guys.